Okay, here we are. We're going to do the we're going to investigate fuel power. Because there's multiple different ways of making fuel power. So I wanted to go into a couple of different ways. So first we're just going to put a refinery here. Remembering that there's a couple of different fuel recipes, and our plastic currently uses outputs heavy oil residue as a byproduct, and we are turning that into petroleum coke. So we're actually going to turn off these two petroleum coke machines temporarily, and we're going to go into this machine and select the residual fuel recipe, and it takes 60 of the heavy oil residue to make 40 of the residual fuel. So I've got so that's done, and let's just put in our I'm just showing you from an experimental point of view so you can see what's happening. And we've got a lovely power line clipping through there. We'll just accept that. And then just as another, we're going to set up here a generator as well, just so we can have a look at its usage and that sort of stuff and what we can do there. So we go here and hook this up. So now it's making fuel. There's none here yet. Nothing's. Oh, and you need to have connected to a power line before the generator generates power. Obviously, you need to feed it fuel as well. So we'll see here. Now that's not a very efficient process because you can see, but it lets me talk really loudly next to a running engine. But the thing I wanted to show you here is these numbers here. Obviously we make 150 megawatts per generator, but 15 cubic meters a minute is what the fuel generator will consume under full load. And over here, this is making 40 per minute with the residual fuel. So I can have at least 2 generators, so another 300 megawatts of power of the byproduct. Now, let's do the maths here. I remember from everything we did, there's 170 of the residual fuel byproduct coming in here. And in here, it needs 60 per minute. So that's basically almost shy of 3 of these. 180 is 3 times these. So if let's just say there was 180 coming in, with that in mind, that means we could be producing 40 times 3, 120, and divide that by 15. We could have 8 power generators being generating. We could have 8 refineries. No. We'll have 3 refineries making residual fuel. That's enough for 8 power generators, and at 150 megawatts, that'll add an extra 1200 megawatts of power, which is the equivalent of 24 coal generators. So it's an interesting thing to keep in mind. Now, this is a really important question, and the really thing that we have to remember about all of this. Remember, we set these up, turning these into coke, and the reason we had to turn the residual fuel into coke was so we could put it into the sinks. And the reason we had to do that is because if we didn't do that, these refineries, the fluid would back up, and then plastic would stop being produced. So on the other hand, we have to think about That's great. We can have the residual generating the extra power and all that stuff. But what happens when? So these 17 refineries that are making that are designated for making plastic for the computer production. What happens when that box of computers fills up that we're sending them to? So if we go over here, in here, this box here, when this fills up, then the computers are going to stop being produced, the plastic will back up, and then the power will no longer be produced because of the whole chain reaction that occurs. And how long will that be? So when we have a look here, a storage container has 24 inventory slots in it. So there's 24. There's 50 computers per slot right now. So that's 1,200 computers that get made. We have 2 manufacturers making computers, so in total that's 5 per minute. So we'll divide that by 5. That gives us 240. Divide that by 60 minutes in an hour, and that's 4. In 4 hours, this box will be full, and then the power will turn off because everything will back up. So what we probably will end up doing is we're going to add an overflow splitter here and send the computers into a sink. So when this box fills up, the production line will continue to run because of the whole we're still producing computers and we're sending the items to the sink, and we'll deal with that soon. But this is one of the biggest things about the game in update 3 is that you have to be aware of the byproducts and what happens with refineries when either one of the output items backs up. It will cease production of the other item. So what we were doing, we were sinking that residual fuel, turning into coke and sinking it, so we would prevent that. But now we're going, well, let's use that and actually turn it into turn it into power. So then power becomes a critical item that we rely on. So then we have to make sure that we never back up the plastic so that this will continually get produced. So a real juggling act going on, but if you understand how it works, then you can make it work. And the only other thing to really drive this home is, and this is like another thing that's like, oh, I'll have to think about that. If we add 1,200 more megawatts of power, these generators don't consume all of that fuel at that rate until they're the more power is drawn from a generator, the more it draws it at the rate. But if it's not running at if all of the 150 megawatts is not being pulled from a generator, then it doesn't use as much fuel. So the actual fuel itself can also back up, and then that have another backup here, and then back up back to here, and so forth. So it's a juggling act, and you have to not overproduce fuel. Now there are some other solutions we can go into further. I'm not going to touch on that right now. I just wanted to talk about how we're going to deal with this current situation.